Coming up on Network Africa. Over 50 soldiers killed in Burkina Faso attack, and that's according to the state army. France to boost military support in Ivory Coast as it adjusts West Africa strategy. Plus, head of Tunisia's Ennahda party faces another investigation. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Let's begin with the army in Burkina Faso. It has reviewed the death toll of soldiers killed in an attack by presumed Islamist militants in the north on Friday to 50. In a statement, it said 51 bodies had been found so far, as several soldiers were still missing, and 3 wounded soldiers had been evacuated from the scene. The military had earlier put out a figure of 8 as the death toll in what it described as intense fighting in Odoland province. It claimed it had killed more than 100 of the assailants, though that number has not been independently verified. The UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, MONUSCO, has echoed the decisions of the African Union Assembly of Heads of State and Government, calling on all armed groups to immediately cease hostilities and unconditionally withdraw from Eastern DRC. Speaking to reporters, the UN spokesperson, Stéphane Dujarric, referred to recent clashes between the army and the DRC and the M23 in Kichanga in North Kivu, with rockets landing near MONUSCO premises.
The Congo, our peacekeeping mission there, echoed the decisions of the African Union Assembly of Heads of States and Government that was held in Addis, as you know, over the weekend. Calling on all armed groups to immediately cease hostilities and unconditionally withdraw from the Eastern DRC. This follows recent clashes between the army of the DRC and the M23 rebel group in Kinshasa in northern Kivu on Friday, with rockets landing near UN peacekeeping premises, where displaced people have been seeking shelter. Fighting also caused displacement of civilians, mainly women and children, from north to south Kivu. Over the weekend, MONUSCO set up a temporary military presence in Mweso to protect civilians who are also impacted by the conflict. Separately, the mission is continuing to provide logistical support to the Independent National Electoral Commission, helping transporting electoral materials.
The French Minister of Armed Forces, Sébastien Lecornu, welcomed the evolution of the Ivorian army over the past 10 years during an official visit to the Ivorian commercial capital, Abidjan. He declined to comment on Burkina Faso's recent decision, even as he re-emphasized France's commitment to engagement with security issues in West Africa, where the Islamist insurgency is spreading. France's defense minister pledged to boost military support to Ivory Coast as Paris adjusts its strategy to West Africa, and that's after neighboring Burkina Faso ordered French troops to leave. French President Emmanuel Macron is due to visit sub-Saharan Africa in early March, although he is expected to steer clear of former French colonies in the Sahel. And joining me now in the studio is African Affairs Analyst Chukwuemeka Eze. Thank you very much, Mr. Eze, for joining us on Network Africa. Now, why do you think France is willing to engage with Ivory Coast as soon after being driven out of Burkina Faso?
I think the lowering of the flag of the French armed personnel in Burkina Faso and driving them out by the Burkina Faso government, military junta, is a wake-up call for France. Recall that France has been dilly-dallying in actually investing in some of its enclaves, colonial enclaves, which are now, to me, independent, but not really independent. So I think what Burkina Faso has lost, France wants to strategize to ensure that it doesn't lose Ivory Coast, that's Côte d'Ivoire, Niger, and Chad. As it is today, Mali and Burkina Faso are not in good terms with France. And if you visit those countries, it will be understandable how France has not helped its colonial enclaves to develop. They are still living as if they are in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Last year, I was at Houphouët-Boigny International Airport. Just like, look at the rural airport in Nigeria. So France is just interested in developing Paris and other cities in France. But all the African, so many African countries are beginning to question, why are they permanently undeveloped despite the assimilation policy of France that makes them second-class citizens of France, even when you are not within Paris or any part of France. So they are beginning to question it. And the activities of the Islamist insurgency has made some of them to take this agitation beyond the normal level and to begin to romance with Russia. And that is where, with the romance with the Wagner group, the Wagner mercenary group of Russia and the Russian government, a splinter group within this government, within Burkina Faso and Mali, are more interested to deal with Russia, and they are getting part of their populace to support them. Because over the years, they have not seen tremendous development brought to any of these countries.
So we talked about Mali and right now Mali and Burkina Faso are in similar places now. But for Mali, it had to do with the Russian relationship. Now, what do you see? Do you see this as detrimental erosion of France's influence in its former colonies?
Yes, it is. It is, because Russia is challenging it. In Central African Republic, in Mali, and in Burkina Faso, although they are yet to be boots on the ground, in Burkina Faso by Russian soldiers. But there are efforts to put boots on the ground. And if you have listened to Traoré, the junta leader, the way he speaks, you can see him tilting towards Russia. So France, and that brings about this statement by the Armed Forces Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, saying that the Ivory Coast military has been transformed in the last 10 years. No, that's a coded diplomatic language. It only means that they want to drive resources to make the Côte d'Ivoirian army to be a very powerful army, so that any intrusion by the Islamists through Mali or Burkina Faso, they will be able to quell it. So they want to. I remember Houphouët-Boigny was a minister in the French government before independence. So they are inextricably tied. I mean, Côte d'Ivoire and France.
Okay,
so they want to boost it.
Yeah. So what do you think is the fate of Mali? What do you think that fate is likely to be at the end of the Russia-Ukraine conflict? I mean, will they be indebted to Russia? What do you think?
I think it depends on a lot of factors, because if you read the history of some of these countries, you see coup and counter-coup. If there is a coup by a splinter favorably disposed to France, then these countries will return to their romance with France. But if the splinter, more minded to deal with Russia, continues in power for a very long time, then it will get to a point that Russia will have a strong foothold to be able to challenge France in its backyard. Let me use that Nigerian terminology. So basically, it's going to be tough, because France is getting a challenge. And when they were asked of Burkina Faso, you discovered that he didn't comment. The minister didn't comment, because he didn't want to let the cat out of the bag. But something is wrong somewhere. And the only way to make it better is to build Côte d'Ivoirian army, build that of Niger, build that of Chad, and possibly proceed to Guinea.
Thank you very much. African Affairs Analyst, Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze, thank you so much for your time on Network Africa. Now, authorities in Tunisia have summoned the head of the main opposition party for questioning. The Islamist Ennahda party leader, Rached Ghannouchi, had been asked to present himself at a police station in the capital, Tunis. Police have arrested several prominent figures critical to President Kais Saied in recent weeks. They include senior Ennahda politicians, the head of an independent radio station, an influential businessman, and 2 judges. President Saied, who dissolved parliament in 2022 before rewriting the constitution, says his actions are necessary to save Tunisia from chaos. His critics have denounced the move as an anti-democratic coup. UN High Representative for Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries and Small Island Developing States, Rabab Fatima, has been briefing reporters on its upcoming 5th UN conference. Fatima is emphasizing that the help the most vulnerable member states get through this period of peril is a litmus test for the idea of leaving no one behind and for the UN's global commitments to solidarity and cooperation. The conference will take place at the head of state and government level from March the 5th to the 9th in Doha, Qatar.
In Qatar, we will propose partnerships and pledges to deliver the Doha Programme of Action, a roadmap for the entire international community to help the LDCs achieve a resilient recovery from the current crisis and accelerate our progress to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
LDCs remain one of the most untapped potentials in the world, from natural to human resources. By the end of the decade, 1 in 5 babies will be born in the LDCs. Their youth population are already opening a massive potential demographic dividend. The number of working-age people will double over the next 3 decades to over 1 billion in the LDCs. And these young people are extremely entrepreneurial and innovative. If we can address that what stands on the way of harnessing the potentials that exist in the LDCs, namely access to finance, structural constraints, trade barriers, ICT limitations, expensive power and energy, etc., the LDCs can be the next centers of excellence for many economic and social innovations. And how we help the most vulnerable member states through this period of peril is a litmus test for the idea of leaving no one behind, and indeed for our global commitment to solidarity and cooperation.
Still ahead on the program, India welcomes cheetahs transferred from South Africa. I'll bring you the details in just a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. The United Nations Deputy Spokesperson for the General Secretary Farhan Haq has commended the UN Peacekeeping Mission in the Central African Republic. He says the UN Peacekeeping Mission has continued to partner with the CAR government to help build sustainable peace and ensure security in the country.
The Central African Republic, our peacekeeping mission, MINUSCA, continues supporting the government. In the Central African Republic, our peacekeeping mission, MINUSCA, continues supporting the government.
In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our peacekeeping mission there echoed the decisions of the African Union Assembly of Heads of States and Government that was held in Addis, as you know.
In the Central African Republic, our peacekeeping mission, MINUSCA, continues supporting the government to build peace and extend state authority, including through the rehabilitation of road infrastructure and community violence reduction. A bridge destroyed during armed groups' attacks in January 2021 was rebuilt with the mission support in Yakari, in Mbumo Prefecture. It enables safe transportation for the local population, rapid deployment of UN peacekeepers, and the delivery of humanitarian assistance. The mission also helped improve detention conditions at the Buar prison in Nanamamberi Prefecture and trained 25 detainees in new skills to facilitate their socio-professional reintegration and offer them an alternative to recruitment by armed groups.
Zimbabweans are now suffering from the depreciation of domestic currency and high inflation rate against the backdrop of global inflation. Global food and energy prices have continued to soar, and so have prices in Zimbabwe. In addition, the U.S. Federal Reserve's continuous aggressive interest rate hikes have led to a sharp depreciation of the Zimbabwean currency against the U.S. dollar. And this has directly pushed up the price of imported goods and further intensified inflationary pressure across the country. At a large chain supermarket in the capital city of Harare, a bag of 10 kilograms of corn flour is sold for 8,290 new Zimbabwean dollars, which is about 9.5 US dollars, nearly 9 times that of 929 new Zimbabwean dollars asked at the same time last year. The official exchange rate of the Zimbabwean currency against the US dollar was 124 to 1 at the end of February last year, while it has now become 871 to 1 today. That's on Monday, yesterday. According to the website of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, the central bank of the African country, due to continuous depreciation of the domestic currency, many Zimbabweans have turned to the black market for foreign currency exchange, where the exchange rate between the Zimbabwean dollar and the US dollar is as high as 1,200 to 1. In response, the central bank has successively issued various gold coins to the market for residents to purchase since last July. These coins can be used as a means of value maintenance while helping remove excess liquidity from the market. The gold coins put on the market are gradually taking effect, stabilizing the violently fluctuating exchange rate of the Zimbabwean currency against foreign currency. Also, the inflation rate in the African country has seen a month-on-month decline since the end of last year. A new national action plan for enhancing and empowering Somali women in their country's maritime sector has been launched at a high-level event, bringing together senior government officials and representatives from civil society and international community, including the United Nations. Others attending the launch include Somalia's Minister of Women and Human Rights, Khadija Deriye, its Minister of Ports and Marine Transport, Abdullahi Ahmed Jama, and the head of the delegation of the European Union, Ambassador Tina Intelman.
The WIM's National Action Plan will help to ensure that women operating across the maritime domain are provided increased visibility and opportunities to not only participate in, but also benefit from the sector. Opportunities are limitless in the maritime domain. With its vast coastline, Somalia's blue economy could be at the forefront of delivering change and generating wealth for Somalia's women and indeed for the nation. The collective commitment we are making jointly today in launching the WIM's Action Plan is of vital importance. We need a gender-responsive maritime domain with new procedures and structures that bring real change. We need a sector that recognizes and promotes women's willingness and agency to work in maritime fisheries, mineral extraction, and new law enforcement sectors.
Sierra Leonean Education Minister David Sang returned home to a hero's welcome, and that's after winning the Best Minister in the World award at the ceremony held last week in Dubai. The award recognizes government ministers who demonstrate their excellence in the public sector, their efforts to implement and promote innovation in their domain. Mr. Sang was recognized for his efforts to impart education of the children in Sierra Leone, and he was among 10 finalists. Now let's see some weather news. Emergency teams are preparing to deal with heavy rains, floods and landslides once Cyclone Freddy makes landfall in the eastern part of Madagascar today. Experts from the National Bureau of Risks and Catastrophe had predicted at least 2 million Malagasy will be affected in 9 regions of the country. The cyclone has been churning in the Indian Ocean for weeks now. According to experts, its impact will be felt between the districts of Vatumandry in the southeast and Manakara in the east coast. Those living in the areas have been advised to strengthen their doors and roofs, cut down dangerous trees, and stay indoors. The same vein, the authorities in Madagascar have closed schools and restricted movement to forestall any disaster. The National Disaster Management Office has sent tents, ropes, chainsaws and other supplies to those eastern districts most likely to be affected. The storm caused minor damage to the island of Mauritius on Monday, flooding beachside hotels. The previous tropical storm to hit Madagascar was Cheetah, which struck in January this year, in which about 30 people died and more than 40,000 were displaced. India has welcomed 12 cheetahs that were flown in from South Africa as part of an intergovernmental agreement to reintroduce the big cats in the country. They will join 8 cheetahs from neighboring Namibia that were released into the Kuno National Park in central India last year. The cheetahs, 7 males and 5 females, are the first of dozens that South Africa has promised India over the next decade.
Basically, cheetah have been in decline for the past 13,000 years. South Africa is the first country to reverse the decline of wild cheetah populations, and our meadow population has grown from 217 to 520 in the last 12 years. So we're now in a position to export wild cheetahs to other countries for reintroduction efforts, and this is the first time we have cheetahs available for these reintroduction efforts. Previously, all wild cheetah populations were in decline.
It's a little bit bittersweet. We've definitely got to know each individual cat well over the last 7 months. So relieved that we don't have to check them every day anymore and feed them every 3 days, but definitely a bit sad that we're going to see them go. But I think the benefit of them being released back into the wild in India and hopefully seeing them reproduce and thrive there is definitely a fantastic.
In South Africa, our first 10 cheetah reintroductions were attempted between 1965 and 1992, and they all failed. So we learned, this may sound terrible and we lost 200 odd cheetahs in the process, but we learned very important lessons. And from those mistakes that we made then, we've refined our reintroduction techniques and we've now have this increasing population. We mustn't think that this is going to work immediately in India. They're also going to have troubles initially. They're going to use different approaches. Some of the approaches we could possibly learn from. But we mustn't think that this is going to work immediately,
That's the beauty of nature. Well, on that note, we end Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Mwawadu. Stay safe.